go. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer, and this is Deep Ultra 3.0. Our always guest for this topic is with us today, but before we get on to that, I'm going to ask everybody, if you are watching this show on the Off Planet Media YouTube channel, please also go over and subscribe to the Emily Moyer YouTube channel. Some of my work will continue to appear here, but all of my work will appear on the Emily Moyer channel, and it will always appear there first. Alrighty, cool. Well, by popular demand of people wanting to know her opinion on things going on and also just wondering how she is doing during this period of time, Elisa E is back with us. Welcome back. How are you?
Hey, Emily. I'm good. I'm good. All things considered, I'm good.
You actually look probably the most well I've ever seen you.
MK Ultra suits me. No, I'm just kidding.
It's almost like you've seen it before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been a bit since you've been with us, or been with me here, and obviously, all of the things that we are seeing sort of deployed on a public level now, like, are all things that A, we knew were coming, but B, like, it was pretty obvious to either anybody who's been through it or anybody who's just researched it well, that, like, we are seeing all of the, like, programs, tools, and mechanisms of the MK Ultra and related programs taken from a project level to global deployment. And so I think that, like, I would like to kind of, and I get a lot of emails from you of what you're looking at and stuff like that. So I kind of want to go through what this whole sort of outer picture looks like to you. And then in the Patrons Hour, we'll go into sort of the internal possibilities of this time and some of the upside of the things that can happen right now. But just kind of, first of all, let people know, like, how you are, how you've been, and how you are experiencing this, because that was kind of the question that was asked by a couple of people. People were curious about that.
Cool. Yeah. Well, as you and I have spoken of personally in private, we've lived this for literally decades. I mean, my entire existence. And the irony for me is, and some of your viewers know this because of the last radio show, and the GoFundMe thing was, I was going to leave the area I'm in due to an airway issue that I have, and being at this altitude. And I stopped and changed my mind. And this was the really beginnings of the whole COVID, I'll call it a psyop. And I stayed put, which I'm really glad I did. But I'm prefacing this because I was ready to go out. I finally got to the place where I was ready to go out, figure out, really, who am I? What do I want to do? Just take off and experience life differently. And then literally for me, what I saw was, oh my God, no, I guess I'm not, because MK Ultra is now here for everybody. Mm-hmm. It's in the world. It has opened up. And for me, those of you that do know my story, my altar back, 12 years ago, kept saying this. This is what's going to happen, is they're coming for all of us. They're coming for everybody. I'm a microcosm of the macrocosm. They're coming for everybody. And ironically, I've stated, or she stated, they're writing the tech into us. And I want to preface that a little bit. If you are spiritually sound, meaning you've got your feet on the ground, you're self-aware, you have this connection to something much greater than yourself that supports you, you can use tech and know what you're doing, and you can use tech for good. But there are a lot of people that are very unconscious. They're not self-aware. They have not had what I would call an awakening. And that's as much spirit as intellectual awakening. And it is part of what's feeding this whole thing, this particular psyop, as well as, so many other aspects of it. So for me, it was really clear right from the beginning that this was, here we go, is the feeling was, here we go. This is the beginning. And, I'm going to read something just to kind of preface. I'll go ahead and pull that up now. Just a couple of simple statements. This is from This is from, actually, this is called the Christian Post, and it's called, "Is the Media Engaging in Psychological Warfare Against America?" And that's the name of the article. And I just want to read one sentence, and it says, "One of the secrets of psychological warfare, called psy warfare by the military, is to try to convince enemy troops that surrender is sweet, that it is better to capitulate than to continue to fight, that defeat is inevitable." And that really, that speaks volumes to me. I mean, it's really simple. And I would even recommend for, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners already know this, but I really recommend for people to start looking at things like psych warfare. What does that mean? How does it work? Look into torture and the process of torture. I mean, and there are some people that have done some really great research and work and postings on this, videos including, I don't know, maybe you and Randy have gotten into this. Amazing Polly did a really good one on torture.
I'm not in general a fan of her work, but that video was excellent.
It was excellent.
Yeah, she has some of those, and maybe this is my own personal issue. She has some of those things about her of some of the new media people, right? The newer, Nish and I were talking about this last week, you know, some of the sort of flash without some of the grit, which I kind of prefer some of the grit. And also, like, I have, like, and this is maybe my own issue, I have a built-in level of suspicion about people who attained their rise during the the QAnon sense rise. Even if they don't talk about Q, there seem to be.
I think she mentioned, I don't know if she really talks about it, but I think she mentioned that. And, you know, so many people do mention that. And I try to leave that off the table because I have some friends who are really real devout followers of that. And they've, you know, just, they don't push it on me. They just, every once in a great while, I get something from it. I'm, you know, I think we've talked about it. I stay out of that area. Because I'm not going to go one way or the other. It could go one way or the other. The truth is, I don't know what that is, but I have suspicions in this day and age. And I'll attribute this to Dark Journalist. He said one day, you know, in this day and age, and I'm paraphrasing, but in this day and age, basically, you can't be anonymous anymore because AI systems are running and so forth. You know, you need to step up, show your face, your name, whatnot, because we can't judge. The technologies are far greater than what most people think. And I'm not yet convinced, I'm one way or the other, what QAnon is. I'm really not convinced either way. But anyway, I know that's a sidetrack. But yeah, I shared this with you. I'm going to pull up that email and just make a few quotes on, just to preface all this for people. Oops, wrong one. That's your link. Here we go. And this came from nomorefakenews.com. This is John Rapert. And he put this together in one of his, and by the way, you guys can sign up for free. And he'll email you basically every day with something. But I want to read these older MK Ultra, and not just MK Ultra, but various things on brainwashing, a symposium held at Harvard Medical School on sensory deprivation, CIA interdepartmental memos, and then one a little bit more recent, 2001, from a Thomas Robbins, Benjamin David Zablocki. It's from an article called Misunderstanding Cults. But these, we will talk about it, but I think these are official enough that it stirs people's ability to really listen and to ask questions. So the first one is from the CIA memo. Quote, "Can we get control of an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will and even against fundamental laws of nature, such as self-preservation," unquote. Okay, pretty much says it all. That's obviously from Project Artichoke, which is MK Ultra. And then regarding like quarantine, isolation, social distancing, wearing masks, this one's from the Sensory Deprivation Symposium at Harvard. Quote, "We did not know what the Russians' brainwashing procedures were, but it seemed that they were producing some peculiar changes of attitude. How? One possible factor was perceptual isolation, and we concentrated on that, end quote. The next one is regarding brainwashing in particular. And these are all from the 50s and 60s that I'm reading right now. And this one's kind of in regard to using fake official science as mind control. Quote, brainwashing is a system of befogging the brain so a person can be seduced into acceptance of what would otherwise be abhorrent to him. He loses touch with reality. However, in order to prevent people from recognizing the inherent evils in brainwashing, the communists pretend that it is only another name for something already very familiar or of unquestioned respect, such as education or reform, end quote. And then the last one, this is the fourth, and this is from the beginning of the early 2000s, and this is about misunderstanding cults. And so this would be in relation, think of this in relation to recruiting citizens as contact tracers. In other words, we're going back to Nazi Stasi days of getting people to report on other people. And this is, quote, brainwashing is defined as an observable set of transactions between a charismatically structured collectivity and an isolated agent of the collectivity with the goal of transforming the agent into a deployable agent, end quote. And that's from the early 2000s. And I think those quotes, he always does a fabulous job, John Rapert, but they really, really speak to what's happening right now. My biggest, I don't wear a mask. I planned ahead when this very began, like 3 months ago. I did contact the doctor that diagnosed me with the collapsed airway, and asked him to just send me a really simple note. I knew I was going to need it in the future, and I haven't had to use it until a week ago. So I've been in a lot of contact with people who initially, I've watched this process where initially nobody did anything when I walked around without a mask. Then it got to the point where, I got a lot of dirty looks and stares and an occasional question of why I wasn't wearing one. It has now progressed to the point of people are extremely aggressive. This includes my most recent, which I didn't talk to you about, was last week, it did involve the police. I was accosted basically by a manager of a large store. It was actually the Kroger chain of stores, our version here. And the manager, who is twice my size, male, was extremely rude, aggressive at the door. And I mean, just like just angry. And I kept asking him to call the police so I would show them my note, because I do believe that, I'm not required to show it to this guy. And I said, go ahead, please call the police so we can sort this out. Anyway, I get in the store. He let me go in. He was just out of control. I wound up contacting corporate. And I did okay, but I have to say that one with the overpowering male set off some old trauma inside. I realized when I was shopping that internally I was shaking. And that lasted for quite a while. And when I left, there was a policeman waiting for me. Super nice guy, had been on the force for years, and he was the best part of the whole thing, because I hadn't had any interaction with the police on this issue. And of course, everything was fine. I showed him my note, and now I'm taking the note into the store, trying to nip it in the bud, just so I don't have to deal with things. I'm kind of fed up with it. And so I've watched this progression in my town over like 3+ months, where it's now, the person that called the police, by the way, wasn't the manager. It was an anonymous customer in the store that saw me walking around. So here's the change. And I'm bringing this up, not so much because, as Emily and I have discussed, this isn't really about masks. Masks are simply part of the technique to break us down. It's the same thing as pumping in at the stores, constantly the fear of wearing a mask and wearing it properly and social distancing. This is just part of the technique. And when you get into looking at psych warfare and torture, you'll be able to see the stages that they're taking us through. And the whole thing is really based on the thing I read in the very beginning. It's basically just to get you to give it all up. It's all about giving it up. They wear you down. This is what they do in MK Ultra. And on a more individual and even more severe level, involving a lot of physical stuff, as well as psychological, is to break you down until you are a blank slate. That's an actual term in MK Ultra, literally a blank slate. And I'm watching it happen out of the fear that people are dealing with. And I've started shifting, we're going to get into, I know more of this later, but shifting into a place of seeing that I am standing before a person who lives in fear. Mm-hmm. When I'm dealing with anyone. And I mean, I've had customers just go off on me yelling in the store, and not just at me, but anyone who doesn't have a mask. And what I've realized is these people this is just a symptom of where they live. This has simply brought out the symptom of fear that they constantly live in. You know, they may look like a normal person when everything's all hunky-dory and gone pretty smooth, but as soon as something happens, which is the case with a crisis or an event, in this case, I mean, to me, this is another false flag is what this is, even though people are dying from various ailments. And so once I start looking at it that way, I can much easier not to react, even if I have something come up inside, which has happened several times, whether I want to tell them they're an idiot or, you know, one day I told a lady, mind your own business. And that just totally set her off, you know. Oh man, I mean, she went nuts at that point. So I'm realizing that these people are living in tremendous fear. And I do know what that is like to live in that kind of fear. I used to live in that every minute of every day, waiting to die. I mean, literally, okay, am I going to die today or am I going to die tomorrow? And I don't live in that place anymore. So I can bring, you know, something else to the table. So my point is, if I haven't made this already, is that I'm identifying very specific increments.
The incremental, yeah.
Question of the progression of this psych warfare, which it is. And I'm not going to try to get into what a virus is or what this COVID is. Well, actually, we probably will get into what our opinions on that is at some point. But there's no question whatsoever that this is a full-scale global operation. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm going to stop there. There's some other things, but let's go down the road.
Okay, so you just did a bunch of things that I want to respond to, and then we'll move on to sort of the next portion of what this is. I want to say something about, I'm just going to tell you these all ahead of time so that if I forget, then we can get back. I want to talk to you a bit about John Rapert. I want to talk about how, like, taos is kind of a unique kind of place, and it's unusual that this is sort of happening there. And then I want to talk about the contact tracing program and the cults that you talked about. And then I want to talk about like the process of sort of deciding where your boundary or where your line is. And then after we go through those, and we can get into what we actually think this is. And I have a feeling we'll agree on most of it and probably have a few different ideas on some. John Rapert is incredibly interesting. I can't keep up with him, right? He sends too many emails.
I know, I don't read them all either. I can't, yeah.
Beginning, like the first probably 6 weeks of all this, I was reading everything.
Me too.
And they were more spaced out then. And then now they've just like become, he's kind of like reminds me of me when I get really hyper and going, like once he gets on his track, like get it all before it gets too confusing in here. So I'm just going to put it all down. Right. So I agree.
You know what? But he's good at, for people who don't know anything about all these so-called epidemics and pandemics, he's perfect for taking you through that process.
Absolutely. And so might just be kind of a fun aside because he's been coming up a lot lately, right? So like he's very interesting. He obviously writes articles, but he also teaches people how to think. Not what to think, but how to think. Like he has courses and all this kind of stuff. But it come up, Robert and I actually did a show that was titled, they referred to this in the title, and then it just came up in my series with Michael Wan the other day too. John Rapoport not only looks like, but the way he deploys information, he's fucking Rudolf Steiner. Pull up a picture of the two of them next to each other, and you want.
I could see a resemblance, sure.
Robert loves, one of Robert's favorite activities, like when he's, I don't know if it's when he's bored or when he's just like
trying to find out who's who now.
He loves to look at those pictures, right, of the old, right, and like we all know the main ones, but he can go on. He can just keep another one. I got another one. But I was happy because I came to him with this one, and he was. But we're looking at it, and like, so just, I mean, I'm sort of joking, but sort of not. Michael and I were talking about this as like another way that the doctrine of signatures works, right? Where like, so sure, there's the possibility that like Rudolf Steiner figured out some extreme life extension and that he's now hiding in plain sight as John Rapoport and deploying techniques in a more modern way. Like I give weight to that possibility because we live in a strange world. And he was an unusual person, right? And he had a lot of systems that he had developed and other people's systems who he thought met, like aligned with his, that he was deploying in his life, right? Possibly figured something out. But it's also, the doctrine of signatures is like where like a carrot looks like your eye and it's good for your eye, right? That like the world is magical, and this is some of the beauty of nature, that like for people who are looking and searching for confirmation of the truth of something, right? Like the fact that he looks like Steiner and like the what he does seems to be in alignment with that is kind of a confirmation of path, right? That this is the next logical step or the current evolution of that kind of work or whatever. And so we love just going to town on this when it became Rapoport issue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, well, I can't speak to that really, but I can say this guy is, you know, I think of something a friend said to me a while back, which was, stop looking to the PhDs and the, you know, all the ones that have been educated in the system, which is brainwashing, you know, as well. Because they leave out, it's not that what's in there is all wrong, it's that they leave out way too much. So, and many people who have studied in university and become doctors and PhDs and all that have turned around and said, whoa, you know, there was so much missing. But what I can say about John Rapoport is, I mean, this guy has spent decades focusing on this, you know, like he was naming all the others as they came out and before this one. So he's unique in that, you know, I mean, I'm sure there are other people doing that I'm not aware of, but he's, you know, like my friend said, go to the people that are doing the research and have some experience, or, you know, stop looking for these grant supported, approved, system educated, so-called experts to talk about the things that they've been indoctrinated or brainwashed to not talk about, or downright threatened, for all I know. So John Rapoport, yeah, of course he has that sarcasm and humor, you know, that it's actually, some of it's amazingly entertaining, you know.
Regardless of whether he's Rudolf Steiner or not, in this lifetime, he claims to be 81 years old, looks like he couldn't be more than in his late 50s at maximum, and has like he's not in any kind of cognitive decline, much unlike our current presidential you know, possibilities, right? Like he is sharp as can be. I mean, he is, you know, so he's doing something right, whether he's actually like 160 and pretending to be 81, or whether he's just 81 and looks like he's 57 or whatever, you know, like he's doing stuff right. And I actually think that like this stretching of the mind in the way that he does, right, is part of keeping the physicality young as well.
Yeah.
right? Like he exercises. I'm 100% sure he looks to me like he probably body surfs or does. I think he lives by the ocean, so he does some kind of physical activity every day that involves nature, and he's obviously stretching his mind about across a variety of challenging topics, and
Right.
that works. It is not pills and
Right. Right.
stuff
And I have another friend who I see like that. I mean, she's in her early 70s doing work that I can barely understand it when I read it, let alone be the researcher who's putting this all together. And for me, there's some aspect of it's not even just the mind. It's about these people are doing work that's destiny work.
Yes.
You know, and it's like they got a job, man, and they're just focused on their job. And you know, I can, at least with my friend, I can speak to that. That's what she does. That's all she does, pretty much, because that's what she's known for decades she's here to do, and that's where it goes. And so I think something
bigger is coming through. Something much bigger is coming through. You know what
absolutely.
I mean? And I think
Absolutely.
you know, the word has largely, I don't even like the word, and it's sullied, right? And it's been taken off into all sorts of stupid places. But if there is any true, like, organic, correct form of channeling something bigger and more important through just one person, because when it comes together through one person, it's easier for it to be cohesive, and they can explain it in a way that is an easier narrative to follow than when you're trying to pull pieces from all of these different places.
And that's what both John and my friend, I see them the same way as it's, you know, and they're bringing, can't speak to John as much, but my friend is pulling the information together into one place, and she attributes it, you know, to the other people who actually did the research and brought that stuff
like a organic form of an RSS feed or an aggregator of news, right? I'd say Sophia qualifies in this department.
Yes, she's another one. Yep.
Sophia, I know who you're speaking of. John, definitely. Sophia, and there are
Alana Freeland. Yep.
There's a few others as well that
I'm sure
that do this kind of thing on different topics, right? Like on different kinds of things. But yeah, no, absolutely. So I highly recommend. I'm actually, I think, going to take some of his little courses too. My friend Michael Wan, who I'm doing my new series with, he says like that's some of the best money he ever spent was on John Rapert's courses.
Cool.
Yeah, and so I think I'm going to do that. But unfortunately, John doesn't really respond to requests for interviews. Everybody I know who's tried to, he has a few people he talks to, and that's it. And at first I thought, well, maybe I'm just too small potatoes, but I know someone who's huge potatoes and very good who also got no response. And so it's, but you know what? You can only, if he's here to do that work, so I don't take it personally. You know what I mean? Like, he's here to do that work, and he, you know, if he spends all day responding to people and going on every little show and whatever, he's chosen a few outlets that have a large reach for his, you know, thing. Even I'm 100% sure some of those outlets aren't the ones he would necessarily choose, like, you know, think that are perfect in the way they deploy information, but they go to a lot of people. And if someone's fed a bunch of bullshit, but get to see John Rapert in the midst of it, it may wake up the part of their mind that, you know, so I really appreciate his work, and he's really important, you know, right now.
Absolutely. It's like his time.
Yeah.
You know, I think you said that a while back. It really is like his time, because what's happening, or excuse me, the narrative of what's happening. Let me put it that way. It's about the narrative of what's happening, false narrative. This is his forte.
Well, the difference between him and really everybody else is, well, there's others of us who can put the narrative and the breadcrumbs of the narrative together. He actually understands the science from his previous work on HIV, right?
Yep.
He understands the science of the way the mind works based on the courses he's put together. He has that one guy, I think his name is Jack Hart or Jack Love, who's like a regression therapist through hypnotist. So he understands the way this is deployed individually, so the same thing can be applied to. He's worked with a lot of interesting people, he has like deep, intimate knowledge of every aspect of this psyop as well, not just the overall. Like, a lot of us can look at the thing and go, oh yeah, this looks just like the other thing they do. Like, that's obvious. But when he can clearly describe not only the mechanism, but the details and the facts of each facet, each prong of the, of the shark bite, then, it's very impressive. He's very impressive.
Yeah, and the science and seeing the pattern. He's been at it long enough that, he looked at SARS, he looked at H1N1, he looked at all these as they've happened. He was doing this work for each and every version of this. And so he sees the pattern of the reporting, what the CDC says, what the, all these different outcomes were, the numbers, and so he can just throw all that right back out there in relation to this one. Yeah, no, awesome contribution.
Absolutely. So the next thing I wanted to say was, you live in the Taos area, right? And,
Yes.
and this is for at least half a century or more now been a place of alternative healing that people who are a little outside the norm go to find themselves or lose themselves, whichever one they're trying to do. Or, it's a very crunchy place, people who are into health and whatnot, and people who are into just living outside of the normal mainstream kind of thing. So the fact that this is occurring there, right? It is no surprise that it's occurring here or in big cities or in more sort of traditional kinds of places, right? So the fact that it's occurring in a place that is built on the idea of we think differently than the other people, and it's occurring to that level of calling the police, right? Is super, that is a new level of success. This is the new level of success with deploying the mind control kind of stuff, right? Because, you've existed in this kind of place as maybe still a little bit of an anomaly amongst all the people, but that's okay. We accept that here, and some of us even like it or whatever. But now it's to the point that no, she's different. We have to call the cops. Just being different is an offense worthy of calling the cops, not just of being amused by it or maybe even annoyed by it. But now it's the calling the cops. And to me, that is wow. You wouldn't think, people are supposed to be aware of natural health there. So they, right? This doesn't make any logical sense at all in any way.
Right.
Well,
it actually, it's a very different scenario. And I want to be careful of what I say here. On some of the things I'm going to say are going to be found probably offensive, but this is actually on a very large scale. This area, and I've known this for many years because I lived here before, this area is an MK Ultra hub.
Yes. Those kinds of things.
What I mean by that is I'm isolated as an MK Ultra survivor, very isolated, as if I would be in so many places, and actually more so than some of the larger places. However, on a grand scale, this is an MK Ultra experiment here, in my opinion. And I don't just mean the COVID psyop, I mean decades of it. And what this is, I'll just say my words for it, left liberal new age.
Yeah.
And I want to preface this with, I am not a political person. I don't believe in parties. I don't believe in elections. I don't believe on a higher level. I still believe on a community level, you can have influence when you're in a small place like this. I do believe that. But when you go to the state or federal level, it's all bullshit. And I'm sure most of your viewers already know all that. So I'm not coming from a political place. I'm coming from a mind control place. And what I mean by that is when you understand the technologies that we've had for quite some time, what was done to me in the 60s and 70s predominantly, definitely in the 60s, and continued on for years, was on an individual level. And of course, we all know that the numbers of individuals is extremely high. This has been going on for a long time. But there's also another, and this is another version, which is en masse. when you understand the technologies, they can target a whole region, they can target a city, they can target a neighborhood, they can target a street, they can target an individual home, they can target an individual person. I mean, this is what it has been for decades. And this area is one of those areas. And there's an interesting, I won't try to get into this, but there's an interesting concept that has been around also for decades, and it was called the taos hum. So, I mean, just the possibilities of, and not that long ago, a couple months ago, 2-3 months ago, there was a big C-130 flying around. It looked like it was going to fall out of the air. It was flying so low, and it was just circling the whole region. I mean, people saw it. It was up there for hours. It's kind of like, okay, what's the C-130, just circling the area literally for hours. And my mind immediately goes to, well, they're probably sending out some kind of frequency off the plane. They don't need the plane anymore. They can do it off of satellites and cell towers and, various antennas and so forth. But there's still, it's kind of like with individual MK Ultra, there's still the individual program, even though it has become an en masse program. They're still going to work with individuals in facilities and doing rituals and all that. And it's this kind of the same concept. So it's not really surprising to me as far as this area compared to another larger area. What has been my issue that I've shared with you is how effective on a broad scale this is on the civilian population. I didn't quite think, and don't get me wrong, I have people here who are very aware. There are people in the town, there are people I connect with. There's quite a few people here that, they're all scratching their head like, what is going on with everybody? Can't they see what's happening? So there's always those exceptions, but on a larger scale, this area, this region has been targeted for a long time. It's also a hotbed for UFO activity. Last year there was something in June in the mountains over the Carson National Forest. And then literally in September, not actually less than a mile. I live near the Taos Mountains, the Taos Ski Valley at the base of the mountains. And less than a mile from me, there were 6 sheep mutilated. The typical mutilation, which is there's no footprints, there's no equipment, there's no cars coming in, the people are put to sleep, the dogs the protection dogs don't even bark and all that stuff. So and the whole San Juan Valley has been very high level UFO activity for decades. So to me, and a lot happened to me personally when I lived here before and was attempting to get out of my programming. There was a ton of stuff that happened. It's a very active area. So, to me, it gets back to really the only protection, so to speak, is for a person to be incredibly self-aware, incredibly grounded and present in life, and have some kind of connection to something much greater than themselves, whatever they want to call it. But and knowledge. And this is why I'm a Steiner student, is because it's about education and understanding everything as much as you possibly can, because knowledge is protection, to some degree. So forgive me for my 3-word label, but those 3 things right now, I see very active in the success of this program, because there's an acquiescing in people. There's a giving up, there's a handing over, there's a, hearing the narrative and buying it. There's no thinking going on there. There's no questioning, aside from always the exceptions to the rule. So.
Okay, so real quickly, because you brought it up, before we go on to the next part, which was, I wanted to talk about contact tracing and cults, since you brought up UFOs. What is your thoughts on the fact that there seems to be Congress acknowledging the existence of UFOs during this period of time, right? It's right? It's I mean, Marco Rubio, you know, what, right? Like this whole, I think all of the
ESSA.
all of the misinformation, disinformation, non-information, psyop, all the stuff, the seeds that have been laid throughout the UFO program for the last at least 30 to 40 years are kind of coming to fruition, of course, during this time, which is not surprising to people like you and I, because, you know, if you're aware, whatever you think it is, I think there's different versions of what people might think it is. You know, this would be an ideal time for a Project Bluebeam, right, kind of thing, right, and whatnot, whether it's occurs in the mind or actually occurs in the sky. But this sudden like disclosure that everybody has been, I mean,
I love the word. I love that word, you know. Excuse me, it's been disclosed, okay, for decades. It's been disclosed for decades. I mean, that is the disclosure. It's been here. It's, you know, it cracks me up. Well, when you have a situation like TSSA and, you know, it's loaded with ex-CIA deputy administrators and, you know, I mean, come on. There's no ex-CIA. I mean, there is, but you know what I'm saying. It's
the only real ex-CIA usually are either jobless or in jail. There's no
they're true whistleblowers. Those are the only ones that are ex, you know, or the ones that are truly whistleblowers. You're right, and they're in trouble on some level. So, well, what I see is, first of all, the whole UFO issue, abduction, which I can speak to personally for decades of my life. All of that is mind control. Mm-hmm. Okay, in mine, I'm not going to get into whether there's life out there or in they're visiting here. That's not where I'm going to go, because I'm sure there's life somewhere else. I mean, but the point is that in my experience, my background is that the UFO, the abductions, the alien interaction, so-called alien interactions, which I've have said repeatedly now, in my case, are demonic or entities. These are malevolent beings that are not so much getting in a ship and traveling from a star or another galaxy or another planet, as much as crossing dimensionally into, you know, into physical manifestation or whatever you want to call it. Mine were directly related to my mind control programming. Mm-hmm. And just to clarify that, when I had, and I remember this moment, I was living in Moab and I was in deep deprogramming, and I had the moment full-on realization and acceptance that these aren't aliens, these are demons. Okay, these are malevolent entities. These are beings that are working for the dark side. As soon as that fully came onto me, do you know, I never had another interaction or, you know, nothing appeared of them in my room or whatnot, ever. And this is like going on a decade. Okay, so the jig was up. Yeah. You know, the story was out. The deception was no more. And then I could give you a whole litany of how many of those experiences regarding various aspects of what it was presented as. And I had the realization of what it really was, and it ceased immediately, instantaneously ceased. So there's some, to me, that fits into some spiritual laws that are active here in the world that, you know, these dark forces, however they're working, whoever they're working through, as in the case of, you know, this psyop, when you educate yourself and you face these things full on, they lose their power. Yeah. Yeah, and either they're, and that to me is the UFO issue. And here's the other thing. It's like the guy who told me about one of the local farmers that has a field next to us told me about the sheep mutilation. Well, you know, I looked at him and I said, oh, okay. I said, you do know that we've got those ships too. And, you know, to me, it's like, I don't think people realize, and Joseph P. Farrell would be a great place to go for those who don't know the history of the technology regarding airships and so forth. But we've had them for decades. The Russians have had them for decades. You know, not every ship is some alien directed. I mean, to me, it makes perfect sense. And this is my opinion, but it makes perfect sense why these guys or girls or whoever was, you know, tractor beaming these sheep up back in September is, you know, the parts that they take out are areas where toxins would accumulate in that particular tissue. And I'm trying to tell people, well, you know, have you noticed that we've been sprayed with chemtrails for 30 plus years? You know, my opinion would be, this isn't some alien trying to figure out the life of a sheep. It's humans trying to determine the concentrations of their chemtrails. You know, they've been doing it for years, you know? So anyway, that's but as far as this time, it fits into the whole mind control narrative. And possibly it could be I mean, they're putting an awful lot of money and energy into this. So it could be the Project Bluebeam thing, but it could also just be part of taking down people, like part of what we were talking about, excuse me, the PSYOP process, the torture process. It could be part of moving them into such a critical point of fear at some point that they completely acquiesce to whatever that next step at that time from the perpetrators is. In other words, we'll save the alien card for this, you know, this level of control, or this level of getting them to completely hand over. So that's where I'm at.
I think that's an interesting point. That I don't know if you know who Nish is. Like, she's my friend. She's been on the show several times. You know, she's part of the group. But she has a show called Nox Mente, where it's her and her host. They kind of talk about with the people from the alternative media about their dreams. She's really into dream analysis. And then they also have another show called The Obelisk, where they talk more about general stuff that's going on. And she has a new show called The Cosmic Salon. But I just had her on my show a couple of weeks ago, and she made a really interesting connection for me between the Black Dahlia murders and the cattle mutilations. And they started about the same time. And the way she was dissected was exactly the way these cattle mutilations occur. So there was like a human sacrifice that sort of kicked off this operation, which may actually be eventually where they're going with some of this, right? And I was like, wow, like we didn't get she's done some work on it. She's talked about it a lot. We didn't get super deep into it in the conversation, but just intuitively and they never really got resolution on that either, on the Black Dahlia murder, right? You're familiar with?
Yeah. I'm very familiar with serial killers too. And, you know, I got to throw this in there because there's a man who was taken out, absolutely murdered, Dave McGowan, you know.
Oh, yeah, totally. I'm with you 100%.
His book, Programmed to Kill, is an absolute must. And I know the picture they picked for the cover, it's like, did you have to put that on the cover? Because people aren't going to pick this book up. But then again, it kind of weeds out those that have, you know, not really good intentions of figuring out what's truly going on. Because I'll tell you, it is the premier work on what ritual killings are all about, through mind control, totally through mind control. And the whole narrative, another false narrative on the serial killer, which is he blows it out of the water. He just blows it out of the water. And again, this helps, is unpleasant as some of these things can be. And he doesn't go into a lot of gory details. He has to and he says, I'm going to just throw out what I have to say to get, you know, the point across. It's not a book about the gore and all that. It's not for voyeurs. It's really, it gets back to what we're talking about, which is mind control is the name of the game. This has always been the name of the game. Always, 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 always. This goes back centuries, thousands of years. This is nothing new. The version of what is happening is, you know, the technique, the circumstances, the but it's really the same method. It just gets upgraded.
Mhm.
And according to technologies, that we have now that we didn't have 100 years ago, changes what it is. But the methodology is really the same. The process is really the same. And so I do like to send people to this book because it really changes conceptually your worldview of what you thought you understood about the so-called serial killer. They were mind controlled, period, end of story. And he presents so many cases of that happening.
Yep.
And then, like you just said, so, I mean, he talks about, I think he even mentions Black Dahlia too in there. This was ritual. This wasn't really anything else. It wasn't some sexual madman. It was a ritualistic, programmed individual who went out and did the bidding for his programmers.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I don't know what the cattle and sheep mutilations true. I can't say I have inside knowledge on that, but I absolutely have drawn a conclusion years ago that this is related to this is just science for them. This is science, plus it throws a whole new fear level into people by, oh my God. I mean, people, and I mean, the guy, even the farmer guy who told me about it, man, first said it, he said that, the sheep had been mutilated. And my first response was, because his sheep are they're always jumping the fence and coming over into our field, and I have to herd them out. And he was trying to tell me how they were, just really riled up because of what had happened a few nights back. And so he tells me they were mutilated. And at first I said, oh, what, was it a bear, mountain lion? And then his eyes got really wide and he leaned in, like this.
Yeah.
And said, no, I'm talking alien shit. And it was like, there it is right there. That's part of the purpose right there, is to just hit the primal fear. See, you got to get to that primal fear, which is what they do in MK Ultra, with torture and rape and drowning. And they're taking you to that primal level eventually, not in the beginning. They're going to break you down slowly, but eventually they're going to have to hit the primal level, because that's when the person lets go, gives up. It's a primal instinct. It's not I've said this to people. I have an actual memory of splitting that came back to me years ago during the process. And I am completely now removed from the me that's screaming over here. Yeah. And it is it's all in my head. It's just all like, who's screaming? I don't even know who's screaming. And the reason I bring that up is that when you go through this process of torture, they take you to the primal level because it's an automatic response. It's not you don't sit there and go, gee, should I split? Should I not split? That's not happening. You're being forced into something that's a survival technique. And so I believe this process we're in globally will take us eventually, if it succeeds, will take us to, the masses that are living in fear, will take them to the level of primal fear, where, look at now, I'm behind a mask, I've got my sunglasses on, and I can get on the phone and anonymously call the police on that person, and no one will ever know that I did it. Yeah. That's something in that person that's doing that. It's a reaction to what's going on, but that is to me, a very psychological, taking that person down the road to what will you do when we push your buttons the right way? Where will you go? Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I highly recommend people reading. Obviously, his Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon got a lot more attention than the book too. And very important for lots of other I've talked about.
It's a debate which one of them, to me, is the reason they took him out. Which one? Who knows?
I think the main reason they had to take him out is because he had been able to completely analyze in a way that the normal person could understand what's happening now. So it was really more a preventative thing than it was retribution for something in the past. They're just like, he's an everyman. He was a construction dude. He wasn't like with the super high, educated kind of intellect. He had natural human intellect, but he also was of the left, right? He was of the left. Far more, the left-wing conspiracy theorists are much more dangerous to the system than the right-wing conspiracy theorists. And so he had to go. Yeah, he had, it was just that he had to go. But he also wrote a book about fascism too that a lot of people aren't aware of, called The Real Meaning of the F Word.
I have that one too.
Yeah. So people should check out all of his work. It's excellent. All right. So the next thing I wanted to kind of go through, because this all kind of winds back to what we first talked about, was this idea of cults, right, and then of contact tracers. So for me, like, both in my research, and it matches up with my experience, it may be a different set of people for you because you grew up in a different part of the country and it was a different kind of program. But like, so here, the Scientologists and the Process Church of the Final Judgment did a lot of the harassment and surveillance and targeting of individuals who were either MKUltra subjects or just regular kind of targeted individuals, which they're different things, but there's crossover sometimes between them, right? And those are things that most people largely look at as cults. Most people can understand and accept that Scientology is, though a big one, a cult, right? That has certain kinds of both technological and metaphysical tools that they use in order to control the people who are part of the cult, but they also deploy those tools unknowingly on other people, right? And then the Process Church, a similar kind of thing, sort of related to Scientology, but a little bit different. But both of those cults, clans, groups of people are known to have operated MKUltra safe houses around Los Angeles, right, and have been identified by from many different angles of research as people involved in harassment programs, right? So you're aware of this stuff, right? Maybe different groups in different places. What people don't seem to understand is these people who are being pulled into being contact tracers are being exposed to the same indoctrination programs that people in both of these cults do, and being asked to perform the same kind of targeted harassment on people that these cults did in order to gain funding and approval and tax-exempt status from the government.
Right.
Am I right about that? Did I get it right?
Yeah, totally. And I think there's the willing participant and then the unconscious brainwashed contact tracer, which is the person that, nobody's approaching them specifically. And I think these are going to number far greater. And the reason I say that is I go back to Nazi Germany, and, people are always saying, how could that happen? How did it get? Well, it's a process. It's a drawn out long-term process to take people there. It's incremental. And so I believe the contact tracer, I don't have that much information on the official contact tracer program, but the unconscious contact tracer, I mean, these people, I wouldn't even consider themselves a contact tracer. I don't think, they wouldn't even know the term. But they will report on anyone out of their own brainwashing, and this is exactly, I mean, I'm so close to, the next one, just going Heil Hitler to them, I want to do that really bad. I'm not going to, but this is how it happens. This is how you move into that. And, you can go to all the old sayings of, we would never let that happen again. We're in it. It's happening.
Yeah, we can question about exactly how the Holocaust was reported and what exactly happened there. But then it was the Jews, and now it's either the Trump supporters or the non-mask wearers or the science deniers. It's the same thing, just a different religion or just a different culture, right? So
divide and conquer, and it's a new prejudice.
Yeah.
If you're not wearing a mask, they're prejudiced.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you have a valid reason. You don't even get that far. Or that you believe it's your silver. None of that matters. If you don't have a mask on, you're bad.
Yep.
You're bad and you're not following the rules. I mean, I had one lady yell at me, "It's the law." I mean, she screamed it at me, and it's the new prejudice. And then, of course, don't even get me started on the riots and so forth. But
Yeah.
They're throwing in a variety of forms to confuse, divide, and just amp up that level of fear.
Yeah. Okay, so the last thing I kind of wanted to get to in the first hour here, and then we're going to go to more of some of the internal aspects of all of this on the other side, is, like you talked about, you don't wear a mask, right? And you talked about your health concern, your issue with your collapsed lung and this whole thing with the note. And one of the things that like I've really been like paying attention to and looking at is that like people need to, or at least people who care about this stuff, because obviously the majority don't, and they're just doing what they're told. But like for each person, like their boundary, right, or their line in the sand, that feels like a little bit of an extreme term to me. I prefer boundary, or your right, like is a different place, right? And I think like the importance of picking one that you can comfortably stand firm in yourself in, and that like it doesn't. So like for me, like obviously I live here in Los Angeles where it got extreme more rapidly. So there was no option of not wearing a mask to go into a grocery store.
Right.
Right. And so like, so I thought hard about it, right? Like I really sat with it, and it was like, okay, there was not even any like little Mexican grocery stores where they seem even more scared about it than, right? So we're like, oh, go find us. That wasn't happening here. So it was like, okay, so am I going to wear the mask and go in the store, or am I going to stay home and order my groceries, in which case I'd be paying 30% more to the same companies that are not respecting my personal freedom or my intellect or anything. So that was a no, I'm not gonna do that. So like, okay, so I kind of, I decided pretty quickly on that I'm not gonna participate in the mask economy. So I'm gonna only wear something that I already have. Right. So I have this headband that I bought when I lived in New York for like that covers your ears for when it's snowing outside if you want to exercise.
Yeah.
I kind of pull it across it's not right. It's ridiculous.
Right.
And I kind of wear it at an angle, right? Just to but kind of, and sometimes I leave one side of my nose hanging out, right? But I just decided that I was not going to argue with people about the mask. Right? Like sometimes I even put it over to go in and then I take it off when I'm inside, or I'll pull it down unless somebody looks at me, right? Because then I'm in there and I'm breathing, I'm getting my shit and I'm leaving, right? And I just decided that for me, now I know there's people who for them, this is a really important issue to have these conversations and these arguments, but it became pretty clear to me that like, there's all the energy being focused on the masks and on, the racism stuff, like, right? And that, so everybody is like, it's kind of like huddled over on the end of the football field where the main activity is going on. Meanwhile, there's a completely open field.
Right.
Now, like reality is very changeable. Like there's a tremendous amount of like synchronicity is kind of going on, like a manifestation thing where like speak about something in the morning and it's happening in the afternoon, or it shows up maybe in a way you didn't expect. And I'm feeling more drawn towards using the flexibility of reality right now to expand my metaphysical, sort of relationship with myself and the world, and spiritual growth, and just the way I do the things that I do. So I was like, for me, if I spend like two things, if I spend and it's 30 minutes or an hour trying to educate someone in the store or the store owner about the difference between a law and a mandate, they're likely not going to change their mind. And that's an hour I'm not going to get back. While reality, like at some point, maybe, hopefully people will realize, oh, there's a whole other field over there that no one's playing on. And then others will come and I'll have lost the opportunity to run across the field with no kind of, that's the decision for me. And what other people decide is fine. The other thing is, I also recognize about myself that I'm a person with a tremendous amount of energy, right? Like just, I have a level that other people mostly just don't have. So when I get upset or agitated or in confrontation with somebody, then that's spraying everywhere, and the system loves that energy, that right? Like that, the whole program. And so for me, that's time and energy that I'm not going to get back and isn't like, right? Like, and so I've made that decision, but there are certain things that I will not do, right? Like will not do, like absolutely will not do. And those are not flexible for me. I've made that decision. And if it means I can't have things because of that, fine. Like that's just, like that's the whole, I'm not going to wear a mask that somebody else gives me, someone that they say you have to wear this kind, or it has to go like this or whatever, right? Like I'm not doing any of that. I'm not agreeing to anything. I'm not taking a vaccine. I'm not taking a test. I'm not doing any of that stuff. And it's not even something to argue about. I'm just not. And whatever that means, that's what it means, right? Like, but I think that like I'm interested for you because whether it's like how you I mean, I know you have the health concern, but I also feel like for you,
it's more than that. Yeah.
For you, like like we have we're on a different lifetime. You and I, we have different personalities. We've been exposed to a lot of the same bullshit, but some different stuff. And for you, like that standing firm in that place is the place where you need to stand firm is a little bit different area on the field than when I need to. And sort of how you kind of came to what your thing was going to be and what is the deeper meaning of it for you? Because I think people really need to sit with the question with themselves.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to put it this way. My spiritual practice is about facing whatever comes at me. Mm-hmm. So in other words, I'm not static, I'm not doing or living or thinking the same way I was even 5 years ago, let alone 10 or 20 years ago. Right. So I don't see things as static. Like I can make a decision now in this time with what's going on, and also know that I don't know what's coming, next month or next year or the next 6 months. And my decisions and how I interact in the world may change. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So I'm not static. And that for me, as a matter of fact, if I get the opportunity, there's this thing at the end of the show, I'd like to read something that it's actually officially part of a Steiner prayer, but it's so poignant to what's happening. And it came through, it's called the Sophia Institute newsletter. I'd like to read that because it's really my philosophy on everything that comes at me. I just have to stay grounded and strong and deal with the next piece. Well, for example, the doctor's letter, I've already changed what I'm doing there because I decided with all the confrontation for almost 3 months, and I mean, it just progressed, that my constitution doesn't need to continue to be battered constantly. So if I show the letter at the beginning, it may or may not alleviate that in certain circumstances. So, I mean, that's already really against my civil rights. I don't have to reveal this condition to anyone. So I've made that compromise. I'm sure, I have very, very strong ideas, and they're based in my previous experiences. One is based in a dream I had January 1st, that I know some of the things that are coming very soon. And so as a friend of mine in Moab said, these are the good old days. This is the good old days right now. And I'm not being negative or manifesting negative things. I'm paying attention to signs. I'm drawing on my history. I'm watching the pattern being revealed, the agenda being revealed. And none of this means that ultimately they're going to be fully successful for the next 200 years. It simply means that the reaction, the problem, and then the reaction that they're creating in people and how people are choosing, majority is choosing to react. All of this leads to ideas about what's coming. And so for me, this goes right into my spiritual practice and my personal evolution. And I have already done a switch over to, and this is, I do believe, an absolute result. It's not a virtue necessarily of mine. It's a result of my practice. Okay. And that is that I'm seeing opportunity for my personal growth. Actually recognizing it on an internal level as this is an opportunity.
Yep.
It may not be comfortable, it may not be fun, but boy, is it an opportunity. And I found myself saying a couple weeks ago, in a very, bring it on.
Yeah.
Bring it on. I'm ready. I know I'm in for some shit. Bring it on, and I will step up to the best of my ability in every situation and every day. And I've had some since I said that. And in my practice, the more I take responsibility for, I'll call it what it is, my own initiation, on the light side initiation. I was involuntarily initiated my entire life on the dark side, which has given me incredible insight and perception of things that other people don't see or hear. But also there's another thing, and I wanted to bring this up because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are empathic, extremely sensitive. And I just want to throw this out before I say what I was going to say, that, you know, go easy on yourself, because there are those of us that are picking up what others aren't picking up. And I have absolute proof of that in my life. I literally can lay down at night and, you know, still wide awake in the dark with my eyes closed. And I get, in my mind's eye, I literally see some frequencies generated in the form of light. And they vary, their shapes are different and so forth. It's not all the time, but I know that there's things coming through. I can still see beings, or, you know, things that are briefly in a flash that are not of this world. So I know it's real. And for people that are more sensitive, whether it's just feeling something or seeing something, this is a very challenging time, because we are being bombarded by frequencies intentionally, either individually or by regions or neighborhoods or by states or countries, whatever, you know, they decide to do. This is real. There are people recording these frequencies and saying, you know, this is a new one they hadn't seen on their meter before and so forth. I mean, it's pretty high-tech equipment that I don't have any access to. But I want to throw that out there. And if you're already empathic or just a very sensitive person, this can be a challenging time. I've just shared with you, you know, before we started recording, my body internally has a constant vibration now. And it has been on for probably months. So I know that it doesn't impede what I need to do if I keep my mind and my heart sound and I keep my practice up, but I'm constantly aware of it. And kind of like with the doctor's note, it's like I really took time and thought and spent a couple days thinking about what's the next step for me. Do I need to, and this is what I mean about not being static. Things are coming at us. They're going to continue to come at us with probably renewed force in the next, you know, at least several months, if not longer. And it's good to be able to know your limits, to know, and like you were saying, do I want to spend energy arguing with someone in a store, or would I rather put that energy somewhere else? And for me, it's like, do I want to take everybody's contact tracer confrontation, or, you know, do I want to keep myself a little stronger because I'm more concerned about the human trafficking aspect. I'm more concerned about the nanotechnology and the frequencies and the mind control that's going on. You know, I want to talk about that too, but I'm like everybody else, have to deal with masks, you know, and I have to say there are aspects from my history that when I just go out in public, I already know before I get in the car to go, something, you're going to feel something here. Yeah. So get yourself in this right space because of your history. You're going to feel something here. Yeah. There was something about empathic, and it's gone. I went off on that sidetrack to say to people, you know, be gentle with yourself, and it kind of slipped away. Maybe it'll come back.
Okay, it'll come back when it's meant to, and we will record on the other side. We're going to I do want to, we're going to get into some of the internal stuff. And I
Oh, I
also
thought we were there. Sorry.
talking about like what we were there, but we're some of the interesting other ways
Got
that
it.
people spend their time during this time. But we never quite got into exactly what we think this is. And so we're going to start with that on the other side, and then we'll get into the sort of the inner world. But before we move to the patron section, let people know how they can support you and where they can find you.
Oh, okay. Well, I do. I have to be honest, I had been a bit remiss on my blog site. There's a ton of information on there. I will warn people, I occasionally go back in and tap on the videos and so forth, and many of them are gone. They've been censored now. They're completely gone. But there's still a ton of information, even though I haven't been keeping it up very regularly, and that's at ourlifebeyondmkultra.wordpress.com. And I do have 2 books, as probably most of your viewers already know. Same title, Our Life Beyond MKUltra. There's a book 1 and then a book 2. And you can find links on the site to that.
Cool. Awesome. All right. You can join us for the second half at patreon.com/offplanetmedia. We'll see you on the other side.